Hey there, welcome to the Rooted in the Word podcast. My name is Rob Armstrong, and I am so thankful that you have joined us here on what is episode 39 as we keep trucking our way through the year, trucking our way through reading the Bible and letting God work in our lives. And we are going to be in the second half of 1 Samuel in terms of our discussion of Scripture today. And it's an amazing moment all throughout the life of David, what's happening between David and Saul. It reads a little bit like something that you might see in Braveheart or some other kind of epic out in the wilderness and between the fields of battle. And there is so much to learn. And the thing that I would love to focus on in our time together today is learning to just trust the Lord. Like David just trust the Lord in these passages in a way that just seems hard to imagine. Like it's just hard to fathom that he would trust God in the way that he does, to the depth that he does. Just the example that I want to share with you comes from 1 Samuel chapter 26. It's not the first time. In fact, it's the second time that David spares Saul's life. So Saul's king of Israel. David's been anointed to be the next king of Israel, and Saul's trying to kill David. And it's just ugly. Like the entire exchange. There's betrayal. There's a deep relationship that happens between David and Saul and his family. David and Saul's son Jonathan become best of friends, but Saul's heart is just turned cold against David, and then it just gets ugly. And throughout every part of this book in 1 Samuel, David trusts the Lord. Now we'll read later in David's life where he has some horrible moments in his life where he doesn't trust the Lord. But as I was reading through and thinking about what to talk about in our time together, I've always been struck by David's dependence on the Lord and his plan. As a pastor, I have heard in my lifetime, growing up in the church and being a pastor and hearing people talk about not ever going against the Lord's anointed and respecting what God's doing, and we pull some of that language from what we see happening here. So let me give you the scenario. So David and Saul, again, they're at one another. And so David finds where Saul is camping with his troops and his army, and in particular, not just where the throng of soldiers are, but he finds where Saul and his closest of circle are. So in 1 Samuel 26, David sends out spies. He learns that Saul has come to this place, and in doing so, David saw the place where Saul lay, with Abner, the son of Ner, the commander of his army, and Saul was lying within the encampment while the army was encamped around them. Then David said to Ahimelech the Hittite and to Joab's brother Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, "Who will go down with me into the camp of Saul?" So David's like, "Who's going to sneak in with me?" Then Abishai said, "I will go with you." So David and Abishai went into the army by night, and there lay Saul sleeping within the encampment with his spear stuck in the ground at his head, and Abner and the army lay around him. Then said Abishai to David, "God has given your enemy into your hand this day. Now please let me pin him to the earth with one stroke of the spear, and I will not strike him twice." But David said to Abishai, "Do not destroy him, for who can put out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" And David said, "As the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him, or his day will come to die, or he will go down into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should put out my hand against the Lord's anointed. But take now the spear that is at his head and the jar of water, and let us go." So David took the spear and the jar of water from Saul's head, and they went away, and no man saw it or knew it, nor did any awake, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen on them. Then David went over to the other side and stood far off on the top of the hill with a great space between them. And David called out to the army and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, "Will you not answer, Abner?" Then Abner answered, "Who are you who calls to the king?" And David said to Abner, "Are you not a man Who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not kept watch over your lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy the king your lord. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die, because you have not kept watch over your lord, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is, and the jar of water that was at his head. And it's just this beautiful moment in battle where David says, look how close we got. We stole this from right next to your king, but we didn't kill him. And I've always thought that so much of this would just be so good on screen, just to see it. But what I would love to be able to see is that puzzled moment in the eyes of Abishai, who's like, why would we not? Like, look, it's right here. It's right here. But David understood something. David understood something that so many of us don't understand. And it's that God has a time and a place and a plan. And it's never our job to get ahead of it. It is our job to simply walk in agreement with the Lord on what he is doing, when he is doing it. It is not our job to get ahead. We are not to get ahead of the Lord. We are not to take things into our own hands. If God has said, then it is going to happen. Man, what a truth. If God says it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And we are not to interfere. We are not to intervene. We are to do our part and be faithful to the Lord in what he has called us to, and trust him. David got it. At this point in David's life, David gets it, to not take things into his own hands. Now, David forgets this, commits horrible sins by taking so many things into his own hands, which is, I just say, would be a way to learn from this and thinking about what happens later in David's life. But we have to be careful that we don't take things into our own hands and begin to think and believe that we know better. David understood he did not know better in this situation. He understood that he did not want to do even what he might want to do, because it would come with guilt. And we have to take that into consideration in our lives today, that we need to make sure that what we do, we're not ever doing guilt. We need to be able to live with clear consciences before the Lord, and I would even say with one another. We need to be able to be in a clear conscience in the way that we don't push, we don't gossip, we don't pull, we don't go behind each other's backs. We may never, ever be in a situation where we could spear a king to the ground to further what God was doing. But we will manipulate it like crazy. We will talk about it. We will ask questions and prompt and provoke, and we will do all kinds of things in the name of the Lord. And we need to learn from David not to do that. That we should just be patient with the Lord and trust the Lord and be faithful to the Lord, and not try to help God's plans go faster or get where they need to go, but to, as fast as we can and as quickly as we can, do what God says for us to do with our lives. And David got it. And I do love the way that David and these kind of machismo look at how close we were, taunting a little bit. As a guy, it's good to see that David's still a guy, but he was a guy that trusted. And what a lesson for Saul to learn, that his life is in the hands of the Lord. That no matter how many people he put around him, no matter what he did on his end to also try to control and put things in his hands, that it wasn't. It's not just David that we learn that it's not in David's hands. It's not in my hands. It's not in Saul's hands. Like, it's just not in God put them in a deep sleep. Let this happen for Saul also to learn that it's not in his hands. And I hope we can learn that. There's so much here in 1 Samuel, and I would love to be able to just unpack all of it. And we can't, not in this format, not on this platform this way. But I do hope you'll read through it, and I do hope you'll see as you read through 1 Samuel and as you move towards the end of it and what happens in Saul's life and how things work out for David, and you move into the book of 2 Samuel, that you will see the trust in the Lord's timing, and then learn from that. And if you're struggling to trust with God's timing, then spend some time talking to the Lord about that. If you're struggling with his timing because it's happening too fast or it's happening too slow or it's not happening the way you want it to, which is not really timing, but you're struggling with the way the Lord's working, or maybe even struggling with who God's doing it through, take it up with him, but trust him. He is so trustworthy. You can trust him. Listen, I hope this will be a little shorter than some of the ones we've done recently. I hope this is good for you. We're thankful you're here. Thankful you're listening. The faithful few to the Rooted in the Word podcast. But share with your friends if this is good for you. Love to know how God is working. Let us know through comments. Reach out to us through social media. And we will see you next time as we try to stay rooted in the Word.